Again, welcome. Just before we get started, if anyone is in need of card captioning, there's a slide on the screen right now that describes the steps to access that. So if you just look at the bottom of your pane and you'll see live transcript, and you can, there's an arrow that will appear if you drag your cursor over to the right of that. And then what will show up is three options: show subtitles, view a full transcript, and subtitle settings. And so showing the subtitles will show them right there on the bottom of your screen. A full transcript will show at the right of your screen. And then within the subtitle settings, you can change the font size or any sort of the attributes of the font. Does anyone have any questions about that? Great. So welcome. Tonight we're meeting to talk about our Justice Reinvestment Equity Program here at Northwest Health Foundation. We budgeted just about an hour to share with you all of the developments and our ideas about this program and our intentions on bringing it to the communities that are doing the work close to the ground. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat as we move through. My colleagues are here with me, and they'll be helping me out moderate this chat. And so today, we're going to be going over just some highlights, and we're hoping that this leads to more conversations in the future. We're hoping that this is the very first of many conversations with many of you folks. So we're going to meet the team, talk about the history and context as it relates to the Justice Reinvestment Equity Program. We'll go over some of the main points about the program, the most important points to your organizations and folks like yourselves. We're going to talk about our learning community. We have an intention on seeding a really robust ecosystem of folks, creating crosswalks and working together across the state of Oregon in this work. We're going to talk a little bit about evaluation reporting, and then we're going to keep it open to Q&A. So we're going to try to keep the presentation relatively brief so that we can have enough time to really discuss all the parts with you folks. And so I am joined on this call by one of the most amazing human beings I have the honor of working with, Cleo Tung. Cleo, I'm going to throw it over to you to introduce yourself.
David, I feel the same way about you. Hi, everyone. I'm Cleo Tung. I use she, her pronouns. I'm one of the new program officers at Northwest Health. And I'll just keep it really brief. You know, like David, I've been with the foundation since end of July. Previously, I was working at Partnership for Safety and Justice, which is one of the many coalition members that helped advocate for this program. And I'm really, really excited to be here. Pass it back to you, David.
Thank you. And what Cleo did not share, hopefully not telling your story, she is a new parent of a beautiful young child. So we're super excited to have one of our first foundation babies on our crew. In the background as well, we can't go without naming Jen Matheson, our Director of Programs. She's helping us out with moderating the chats and grabbing all of those questions that you folks may have. The goal with those questions is to create an FAQ that will be updated ongoing, and that's going to be listed on our site. So if you have any other questions, please do put them in the chat, because we want to make sure that we're rounding those out and making them available to everyone. And Jen, do you want to say a few words?
No, just to say I'm really thrilled everyone's here. We've been in planning mode for so long that this is a very exciting night for us that we get to be talking to you all. And just to say, feel free to drop questions in the chat to everyone. If you have a question you don't want to share with everyone, just find my name in the chat and select me, and you can direct message me. Thank you.
And so just a little bit about Northwest Health Foundation. Northwest Health Foundation started out as the Physicians Association of Clackamas County in 1938, the nation's first prepaid Health Plan, or HMO. At the time, they were serving timber workers in Clackamas County and eventually expanded services to all of Oregon and Southwest Washington. And so that commitment to serving Oregon and Southwest Washington continues today. In 1997, the HMO sold, creating the endowment. And that endowment started all of the grant making and resourcing activities that the foundation is currently involved in. And over time, we've granted over $100 million to more than 1,300 grantees, covering every county in Oregon as well as Southwest Washington. If you'd like to know some more about Northwest Health Foundation, please feel free to visit our website. We keep it pretty up to date with a lot of information, northwesthealth.org, and you can also sign up for our e-news updates. Again, questions, we'll be fielding those in the chat, and we'll definitely address them all by the end of today's session. And if we haven't, we do welcome you to reach out to us, and we'd love to have a one-on-one conversation with everyone. So Cleo and I are going to bounce back and forth throughout this presentation. And so I'm going to turn it over to Cleo to give us some history on the Justice Reinvestment Initiative in Oregon.
Great, thanks, David. So we're really excited to provide an overview of the Justice Reinvestment Equity Program, which you'll hear us say JREP for short. But before we dive into the specifics, we thought it'd be helpful to provide some history and context as to why the program was established. So David, if you could move on to the next slide, we wanted to start with naming the problem. So I think it's probably not a surprise to most people on this call that the US has a mass incarceration problem, and Oregon's no exception, right? So since the 80s, Oregon's prison population has skyrocketed by 440%. Although thanks to advocates, this has slowed down in recent years. But to put things into perspective, the state's population has increased by 59% during that same period. So just by looking at the numbers, we know that prison growth has far outpaced population growth in our state. And we also know that the problem of mass incarceration has a disproportionate impact on folks of color, right? So Black, Indigenous, and Latinx people in particular are overrepresented at nearly every decision point in the criminal justice system. And according to a Sentencing Project report, Oregon's rate of Black incarceration is higher than most states in the country. And so recognizing this unsustainable growth in our prison population, the state actually in 2013 created a program called Justice Reinvestment, which directs state funds away from prison expansion to things like victim services, mental health and addiction treatment, reentry services, and other local programs that promote community safety. The great news is that Justice Reinvestment has been really effective at slowing down and curbing prison growth. The alarming news, however, is that it still has failed to address the extreme racial disparities that are in our criminal justice system. And in fact, a 2020 evaluation of this broader Justice Reinvestment Program found that out of the nearly $50 million that the program granted out in the last couple of years, very few, if any, culturally specific or culturally responsive providers or organizations received funding. And so this means that the communities most harmed by the criminal justice system are also the communities that are the least helped by the system. David, if you could move on to the next slide, that'd be great. And so this is where Senate Bill 1510 comes in. Earlier this year, advocates came together during the legislative session to help address this problem. They formed the Transforming Justice Coalition, and just want to give it a shout out to, I think there are a couple of members from the coalition on this call tonight. And so this coalition is made up of criminal justice reform advocates, impacted folks, BIPOC-led groups, and others committed to ending mass incarceration. And it's through the coalition that they pushed for Senate Bill 1510, which is what established the Justice Reinvestment Equity Program, or JREP. And so the goal was to direct state funds in a more equitable way towards culturally specific organizations and culturally responsive providers that have long been overlooked by traditional funding streams, and this includes the broader Justice Reinvestment Program. And rather than have the state grant out the money directly to organizations, advocates wanted the funds to be administered by an organization that's more closely connected to community. And so that's the role that Northwest Health Foundation is going to play. As a foundation that has experience working with community-based groups and that invests more than 75% of grant dollars in culturally specific and responsive organizations, we're really excited and honored to be the stewards of this program. And so I'm going to pass it over to David to talk a little bit more about the specifics.
And so as Cleo referenced there, this Justice Reinvestment Equity Program, it's an opportunity and a community-directed public safety opportunity to direct funds and resources to groups, to communities, to folks who have historically been overlooked and historically under-resourced to engage in the work and the goals of the program. And so coming out of the Senate Bill 1510, there are some named goals. But there are also goals of the advocates that have raised up the need for equity within our justice reinvestment system. And so the goals are listed here on the screen, but the JREP will provide grants to support a field of emerging and established culturally specific organizations to serve communities that are disproportionately incarcerated, and namely Black, Indigenous, Latine, and other people of color. These goals are meant to align with SB 15 and also to align with the advocates. And as you can see here, reducing racial disparities in Oregon's criminal justice system, promote healing for victims and survivors of violence, ensure that people returning from prison or jail have the opportunity to succeed, and to decrease prison use in Oregon. And so how do we achieve those goals with a program like the Justice Reinvestment Program? And so for us, what we looked at is how do we make sense of a program and make it as attainable and accessible to providers and organizations. And so some of our priority areas that we're looking at, and this is a starting point for us because that announcement that was released last week is what we think and our best estimates and our best guess of a program that is sustainable and viable and that can be met for really deep investments into community. And so some of the program service priorities include violence reduction programs, including violence interruption mentors or after-school programs for youth, reentry programs connected to education, workforce development, and transitional supports, services for victims, including incarcerated victims or victims on pretrial release. And this is just, a drop in the bucket. We really do want to speak to folks about what is really happening in your communities. We want to understand a better understanding of the landscape and the scope of work that's happening and where we can actually draw connections in sometimes unconventional ways, because sometimes folks are delivering services in their communities and they might not relate those services to justice-involved programming, but we want to have that conversation because there might be ways to create pathways between your programming and service and the Justice Reinvestment Equity Program. And now, again, as a starting point, we're looking at a geographic focus across the state of Oregon, a mix of a variety of counties and areas to start conversations, to get in communities, to engage, to understand what the needs are, what the challenges are, and where the gaps exist. And so starting out, we are engaging right now with counties Clackamas, Coos, Jackson, Jefferson, Klamath, Malheur, Marion, Multnomah, Umatilla, Washington, and federally recognized tribes across the state of Oregon. We want to have priorities to help focus our outreach efforts and to have representation across the different regions. And we also want to seek a balance between non-metro areas and metro areas. So this focus on geography is merely just the start of conversations. And we're hoping through the exercises of the next few months from these informational webinars, proceeding into our learning community discussion in just a moment and beyond, that we'll really learn more about your needs as providers and organizations, and where we can actually provide any sort of resourcing. So getting right into the grant structure. And so currently we have plans to offer both project and planning grants. And so as you can see here on the screen, our planning grants would be one-time awards to develop a plan for culturally specific or culturally responsive service. And our project grants would be a multi-year grant to expand your current culturally specific or culturally responsive service. And so both opportunities will also offer the option for some capacity building. And so we think about the planning grants as an organization or service that understands that they have big work to do, but may need a longer on-ramp and may need some time for the planning and development of the ultimate program, project, or service. And so we want to make sure that we're creating a grant option that makes sense for that kind of organization where they are. And our project grants might be best suited for a program or service that is further along, who might be established, that might be doing the work, but need to scale or need to enhance or need to expand. And again, both of those categories of grants will offer the option for capacity building. This is an opt-in, and so with that, you can experience workshops and trainings very uniquely curated to the needs of the program and service provider. It's not prescriptive. We really want to lean into a strength-based approach where it comes to our capacity building. Up to 10 to 15 hours of coaching per month. And we want to make sure that the folks that are opting into the capacity building program are really committed to the work that it's going to take to build and build up the programming and get it to a place that it makes better sense for the organization. And so capacity building could include program modeling. It could include improvement of data systems, performance management, so increasing accountability to meet goals and ensure benchmarks are achieved, and even organizational structure. So looking at how the organization is operating, the implications of leadership, what that looks like, because again, for us, our want is deep investments that are going to be sustainable and long lasting. And we do have a person, I'm calling her out in the moment. Thank you for being here. Our capacity building partner, Latino Coalition for Community Leadership. And just a little about, not trying to speak their story, but just a little about Latino Coalition. They have nearly 20 years of experience providing culturally responsive technical assistance, training, and capacity building support to community-based organizations across the country. Latino Coalition for Community Leadership has a strong track record for supporting and building trust with historically under-resourced groups, including organizations working to reduce incarceration and promote safety in their communities. They do great work with diverse groups throughout this country, and just one example of the work that they're doing is happening right now in Colorado, where they've worked across state and local groups to move government funding into communities that really need them and build lasting change. And so I thank you, Crystal, for being here on the call. And if you folks would like to know more about Latino Coalition for Community Leadership, their URL is here on the screen. It is latinocoalition.org. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Cleo.
Great. So the overview that David just provided is our initial thinking for JREP. Now the next step is to gather input from the community. And so that's why we're organizing something that we're calling a learning community, which will be an opportunity for organizations led by and representing communities impacted by violence and incarceration to help plan for JREP and to also assess their potential role within it. So the learning community is going to be a series of virtual and in-person convenings starting in December of this year and running through March of 2023. About 20 to 30 organizations or groups will be selected to be a part of the cohort and will receive a grant to cover their participation. And it's through these convenings that we're hoping to get feedback from culturally specific organizations and culturally responsive providers on JREP. And also we're hoping that these groups will be able to help shape the program, build relationships with each other, and determine whether the timeline and the priorities of JREP align with their own. And more information, we're still planning the details of the learning community, but more information and the call for applications will be posted on our website on November 2nd. Next slide, please. And so who should apply for the learning community? First off, because JREP is about investing in culturally specific organizations and culturally responsive providers, these are also the groups that we want to bring together for the learning community. Definitions on what it means to be a culturally specific organization or culturally responsive provider was spelled out in Senate Bill 1510, and those are the definitions that we're following. So you can find those on our website, and I definitely encourage folks to check those out before thinking about applying, just to make sure that you fall under one of the two definitions. We also want to bring together groups that are aligned with JREP's geographic focus and also the program and service priorities. That said, if your work falls outside of these priority areas, but you think it aligns with the broader goals of JREP, we definitely encourage you to reach out to us to share more. This is just, again, our initial thinking. And so we really want to hear from folks about what's the work that they're doing in their communities. We also want to engage organizations and groups that have a range of experience and capacity related to providing culturally specific and responsive services. So this includes 501c3 organizations, fiscally sponsored groups, and federally recognized tribes in Oregon that have established culturally specific or responsive programs or services, or that are interested in developing them. It also includes new or emerging groups that are interested in incorporating as a C3 or securing fiscal sponsorship. For example, you could be a volunteer group that's providing culturally specific support to survivors of violence in your community. You might not have C3 status or fiscal sponsor, but it's something that you're interested in getting set up. And you think that the capacity building component of this program would be especially helpful. Another example is maybe you're an organization that mentors youth, which has been shown to reduce community violence and also reduce kids' contact with the criminal justice system, but you don't necessarily describe yourself as a violence reduction organization, right? You may already be doing the work, but you're just calling it by something else. What I will say is the intention of JREP is to support organizations that don't always fit neatly into the public safety box that's defined by traditional funders. And so if you feel like, but nevertheless are doing that work. And so if you feel like your organization is kind of in that field, then JREP could be the right fit for your organization. Next slide, please. And so we wanted to flag some important dates coming up for the program. This first set of dates relates to the learning community. So I'm just gonna open this up here. So November 2nd is when the application will open for the learning community. November 10th is when we'll be hosting another informational webinar. And this will include similar details that we're sharing this evening, but also we'll be diving in a little bit more deeply into the learning community. So if you're interested in learning more, or it's something that you potentially would want to be a part of, then I think it's this webinar would be a great place for you to kind of plug in. November 20th is when we'll start reviewing applications for the learning community. And then December 6th is when awards will be announced. And then starting December of this year, all the way through March of next year is when those convenings will occur. Next slide. And so this set of dates relates to the grant making itself. May 2023 is our target date for when the actual request for proposals for the program will open. September 2023 will be when grant awards are announced. October of next year is when grant awards will be distributed. And then one other important thing we wanted to flag is February to July of 2025. That's the legislative session when future funding for this program will be determined. So this is a new approach, right? We have funding committed for organizations through 2020, part of 2025, but really it's through that next legislative session, 2025, when we'll be advocating for future funding of the program. And David, I will pass it back to you.
Thanks, Cleo. With that, that's really the end of the main parts of our presentation. And I want to, again, thank everybody for joining us. But we want to hear from you and we want to have a conversation. And so even if you, or you're thinking about your organization, you're thinking about the programming of your services, definitely reach out to us because we want to have a conversation about where there might be alignment. As Cleo referenced and I referenced earlier, we're also thinking about emerging or established groups that may not consider themselves in this work, but may be closely related and closely connected. So our contact information is here on the slide and I'll read that off for folks. My name again, David, david@northwesthealth.org. My phone number, 503-210-1644. Cleo Tung, Cleo@northwesthealth.org, 503-220-1955. And anytime you have any questions, all the details about this program are listed on our website. That will be updated periodically because, as we said, this is an ever-evolving process, and we are ensuring that this program meets the needs of the communities that are going to be served. So you can visit northwesthealth.org /JREP for more information, and we'll drop that in the chat in just a second. And we're curious now, moving into our Q&A section, on any questions that folks may have about the program that we may not have touched on, or just general questions about our foundation.
Hi, Rich Hunter here. I had a question for you. I know that some of the needs that we're facing with some of the work that we're doing at NEA and across the board with dealing with the community is a need for more resources, and resources in particular with some of the victims of gun violence when it comes to relocations, et cetera, and just kind of finding out if that's something that in partnership with organizations you would be willing to put in there, as well as having some opportunity to get, because some of these youth into safe places. That's something that we've really been finding out a lot, and we've been doing some relocation ourselves, as well as the mentorship, as well as the programming, as well as all the other things that kind of come along with the things that you already have within your criteria for the grant here. But one of the things that I'm really seeing that there's still a really significant need for with the uptick in violence and things that are happening is a lot of is some relocation funds. So some youth that I know that are also needing some emergency housing at times. So we might need to put them in a hotel room, things of that nature. So I'm just kind of curious, to your thoughts on that, and if that, is something that falls into some of this this work as well.
I'll take a crack at it, and Jen and David, feel free to add anything. I think really the goal of this program is to fund programs and services that get excluded or overlooked by other traditional funding streams, right? And so when you're talking about relocation, and also just want to name, like, this is a program that has parameters set by legislation. And so I think in terms of the relocation, I don't know if I can answer whether that it would, funds would be able to cover that. I think it depends on whether relocation is like within Oregon or outside, right? I don't know if there are rules and regulations about that. But in terms of like emergency housing and things that actually really meet community needs, I think that there's flexibility there. And it's really about, like, how can you make the case that these programs and services are reducing violence in the community, right? And are advancing the goals of the Justice Reinvestment Equity Program? Is it reducing racial disparities in the criminal justice system and reducing Oregon's reliance on incarceration? So I do think that they're, unlike other traditional state funding programs and the broader Justice Reinvestment Program, this new initiative, I think, has a little bit more flexibility to support things like that. Jen and David, am I totally off base?
That all sounds right to me. I mean, to me, it's, you know, like, I think it's, again, yeah, it's making a case about a program that you would want, you know, that you either are delivering currently or that you want to expand or implement. And, you know, how does those kinds of services fit within like what your goals are and how do they line up? So, I mean, that singular question, I'm not sure if we're going to answer, but I think if it's like sort of, you know, fits within something that you as your organization want to build and, you know, have support around, like, to me, it sounds like it's part of it. David, what do you got?
I think you guys hit it spot on. I don't think there's much more to add. I think it's the context of the purpose and goals of JREP. And if we can state the case that this is something that is actually attributing to those purpose and goals, I think that even starting with a conversation and us spitballing and fleshing out the ideas around it could really help give shape to it.
Thank you all for answering that. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for your question.
I was wondering if you could all say a bit more about what the evaluations look like.
So I'll start, and obviously Jen, Cleo, jump in. So we are still formulating the evaluation for us internally. There's probably two sides to what we're looking at as evaluation. One, as a foundation, what are we doing, what are we learning, and how are we better positioning ourselves to serve folks like yourselves? And two, we're working with a state agency, the Criminal Justice Commission, and they have a statutory evaluation that's required of them. So they are bringing on an independent evaluator who is experienced in equity work, who understands procedural aspects of this kind of initiative. And that person's going to be heading a committee that's going to be evaluating the implementation of the program. And so that evaluation is really going to be centered on our work as a foundation and the stewards of this funding. But there might be some implications in terms of data collection and other pieces that we'll have to work with our grantees on. But with that said, that capacity building part of the work that we're going to be doing is really important to that. With the Latino Coalition for Community Leadership, they'll really be positioned to help our grantees understand the parameters of this kind of funding, because it does differ, right, from traditional private foundation funding or other types of funding. So it's a learning experience for us as well, but we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that our grantees are prepared for that as well. Cleo, Jen?
I think it's, you know, this is our first time really running a program with state funds, and where there's you know, a mandate that the state is going to be conducting an evaluation. And so we really see our role as working with the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission to really think about, you know, what is an evaluation that will actually like meet the requirements of legislation and also meet the needs of community, right? And I think from experience, I'm sure folks know, like, state evaluations aren't always like lined up with actually how, you know, community-based groups define success or what is meaningful to them. And so for us, it's, yes, we need to meet that requirement. And how can we work with the Criminal Justice Commission to help kind of inform it and guide it in a way that's more rooted in community? And one of the ways that we are doing that is helping to form a committee that will help guide kind of the development of the evaluation, and really trying to make recommendations of folks from the community with experience in, you know, providing culturally specific services and culturally responsive services to help provide input on the development of that. So I feel like it's kind of nebulous, but more information will be coming as we do more planning.
Okay, great, thank you.
For the applications for the learning community, do these applications, is are you all looking specifically for organizations, or are individuals allowed to be in that learning community?
Oh, David, did you unmute?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I don't know if we've been talking about individuals, but I think we're talking about like volunteer groups, right? So you don't necessarily need to have C3 status or even a fiscal sponsor. You could be doing this as a volunteer run group. And I think for us, it's actually important to have that perspective in the learning community too, right? Because if we're going to be developing a grants program where there is capacity building for a group that's interested in incorporating as a C3 or finding a fiscal sponsor, I think we want to be able to get that perspective early on before we finalize the grants program. Does that answer your question?
Kinda.
Okay.
In my brain, I'm thinking like, if Billy Bob Joe was like, oh man, I'd be a great member of that learning community. So Billy Bob Joe sent his resume and see, you know what I mean? Like his application to you all to be like, nope, I'm not affiliated with nothing. It's just me and Billy Bob Joe, and that's it. So that's like, I meant like an actual like individual.
Or even to add to that, yeah, Anthea and I work together, but just to add to that, if you are incorporating folks who have been incarcerated and are not associated with any organization, or people who are victims, or, you know, just getting some more input. Yeah, that's a great question, Anthea, about if individuals can be involved.
I would just jump in to say, I think the application for the learning community would be the chance for us to understand who you are and what communities you're coming from and how you think about that, right? Like, I think we'd be asking like, tell us who you are representing or who you're working with, right? And if someone was just like, I got a great idea on myself and I've never talked to anybody about it before, probably not. That's probably not the person. But if it's a group, you know, somebody or a group of leaders who have been, you know, who have worked together or, you know, have some kind of shared identity and some work that they've done and they can tell us who they are, I think that's something we'd want to know more about.
Thank you so much for answering my question.
Anyone else have any other questions that weren't touched on today? Yeah, and so I go ahead, please.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I can always ask 1,000 questions, so I have to always be careful like which ones I want to prioritize. So for the grant process, I know that like there's going to be a very robust grant making that you all are going to undertake in the next few months. Is a part of that going to include, or is it already stipulated how much organizations you want to fund, or is it kind of like you have X amount of money and we're going to spread it out for X amount of organizations?
So yeah, I think we have a good guess of the size of grants, the scope of grants, and how many organizations would be funded. That's based on really numerics, but I think part of that learning community experience in us receiving information from folks and getting feedback and understanding what work is actually happening and what it takes to implement that work. I think that's really going to shape the overall grant structure and how we are spreading around that funding. I think we've toyed with a number of scenarios, and we just want to make sure that we are taking into account folks that are going to be served by it and the folks that are going to be doing the serving before we get to that final RFP, which will stipulate all of those grant details.
I'll also add that our intention is really to build a strong ecosystem of providers. And in order to do that, it's about investing deeply rather than widely, right? And so while I don't think we're saying there's a set number of organizations that we're going to invest in at this point, what I can say is that we are really looking at grants that will multi-year grants, right? 1-year grants and then for planning, and then multi-year grants for, do I have that backwards? Anyway, multi-year and 1-year grants to really help organizations build infrastructure and look beyond just right, the immediate needs so that it's sustainable and ongoing.
I have another quick question. I was just reading again on this page, the line about, moving, well, I guess it says state funds, but away from prison expansion into local programs. And yeah, the program that Anthea and I work for, we are inside of the prisons in Oregon. Would those like kind of fall outside being a local community? Because it's its own local community, but it's not in the community, you know, it's all inside. Would that fall in, or because it's not in the community of unincarcerated folks, it would kind of be its own thing?
So I have a clarifying question. Is your question standing up an in-prison program versus a program that exists outside of prison?
Right. Yeah. I'm just, I think at least Anthea and I are here to just kind of figure out if this grant makes sense for our program. But just into local programs is not exactly where we're based. So just wondering if the, working inside kind of presents the problem with that we're not in local communities. And sure, those people go into their local communities, but that's not where we're based.
Cleo, do you want to take this? I know you have a pretty well-formed answer to this one.
I mean, I would say that if it aligns geographically, right? So if the community that you're working with, even if it's an incarcerated group, right, is based in one of the counties, and the service or program that's being provided aligns with those 3 buckets, if it's reentry services, violence reduction, or serving survivors of violence, and you can make a case for that, then I don't see why, a group being incarcerated would be excluded from funding.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I was just wondering kind of how nitpicky it is with those words, just because it is state funds, but that's good to know.
I do want to just mention that the funds would not be able to be invested in like a state-run program within the prisons, right? So it would need to be like a C3 volunteer group or a fiscally sponsored group.
Would it be fair to say, Cleo, that we're based on the service priorities, we are looking for things that are under, again, violence reduction or reentry, and that if it was a program specific to kind of like, serving folks that are incarcerated specifically without like a connection to a reentry program or a violence reduction program, that would not be in the priorities we have for the program. I know that's like, it could be a fine detail, and maybe that's us talking to you and learning more about how you see that program fitting in within, kind of your overall approach as a group. But if it is kind of its own specific approach that's in prisons, but is not kind of interacting with other community-based stuff, that would not be in our service priority. Is that fair to say, David and Cleo?
Yeah, thanks for playing.
Okay. So I don't know how that lands for you all, because I mean, again, maybe that's a conversation we could have one-on-one with you to like kind of hear a little bit more about how your services or program works. But I don't want to like lead you down a path without trying to define that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's great to know. I know that we'll be in touch.
Awesome, folks. Just making a little space for any of those questions that are creeping in. No question too small, no question too big. This is the time for it. I'm curious, while we're sitting here, in terms of this presentation, is this the level of information folks need to carry back to their organization, to talk to their groups, to start thinking about alignment and how this program may work for what you're doing?
I would say absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you, Andrea. Andrea said it's a great start. Thank you. All right, Jen, Cleo, do you have any questions that are popping up for you that we want to ask the group?
Not on my end, no.
All right, if there are, so folks, it's 6:23 now, we have 7 more minutes. If there's no other questions, I definitely want to honor your time and give that back to you. I want to thank you for attending this info session today as Cleo and I work through this very big endeavor as we gear up for what's going to be an amazing learning community. I want to give a shout out and thank Crystal Watson from the Latino Coalition for Community Leadership for joining us tonight. As we talked about earlier, there will be a second info session on November 10th. That info session will touch on some of the information we shared here tonight, but we're really going to try to do a deeper dive into the learning community and the other parts of the grant making structure. That learning community, again, just to say it out loud, will run from December through March of next year. Applications will be open on November 2nd, and we'll start reviewing applications around November 21st. And so our hopes would be that we're letting folks know about their applications in late to early December with a launch, a welcome and orientation in mid-December. So for me and from Northwest Health Foundation, thank you all for joining us tonight. You can reach us anytime you'd like. Please visit our website for more details and all the information you need on the Justice Reinvestment Equity Program. And I'd like to say to you all, good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.